Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and esteemed guests. My name is Mehriban Mammadova. I am the Vice President of Azerbaijani Center of Midwest America. It is my honor to welcome you to the second Global Dialogue Conference, Bridging Past and Future, as we gather today to commemorate the 33rd anniversary of Khojaly massacre. This a tragic event marked in the history of Azerbaijan. I'll give a brief information about Azerbaijani Center. ACMA is a nonprofit organization dedicating fostering intercultural understanding between Azerbaijan people and the people of the United States. Today, as we participate in this conference, we unite in the solidarity to honor the memory of the innocent victims of the Khojaly massacre. We extend our sincere gratitude for your presence. Your participation exemplifies the shared empathy and commitment between Azerbaijani and American communities. Through our collective remembrance and reflection, we continue to draw lessons from the past, ensuring that such tragedies are never repeated, while building bridges between history and our future. At this time, I'd like to invite our community member and Moderator Agadadash Balagadashov to introduce himself and guide us through the proceedings of today's event. However, I'd like to ask everyone to stand up for the anthem of the United States and Azerbaijan before Aga comes to the stage. Thank you. Teşekkürler. Thank you. I would like to ask everyone for a moment of silence honoring the memory of the Khojaly victims. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say welcome to all our guests. My name is Aga. I'm today the moderator of this event. My full name is Agadadash Balagadashov, and I'm currently sophomore at University of Illinois at Chicago. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to welcome you all at the second global conference dialogue, which bridging past and our future. This conference is an opportunity not only to reflect on a history, but also engage in the meaningful discussions that will shape our collective future. Today, we gather to remember, learn, and to ensure that the lessons of our past light the way toward the future, marked by justice and the peace. And right now, we're gonna watch a short film about Khojaly.
Khojaly is a historical and cultural town district located in the mountainous Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, dating back to the 14th through 7th centuries BC. In 1810, peace talks between Russia and Iran were hosted in Askaran Castle, built by Karabakh Khan Panakan, located in Khojaly. After the signing of the Gulistan and Turkmenchai treaties, in early 1813 and 1828, Armenian minorities started resettling to Azerbaijani lands, with their aggressive plans in mind, which resulted in a number of massacres toward Azerbaijanis in the 19th and 20th centuries. About them, we'll talk in our future videos. Today, we're going to talk about the world's bloodiest incident, the Khojaly massacre of the 20th century. The Khojaly massacre. On the 1st of October in 1991, the town of Khojaly was entirely surrounded by Armenian forces. On the 30th of October, ground traffic was cut off. Helicopters became the only means of transportation. When a civilian helicopter was brought down over the city of Shusha, killing 40 people, helicopter traffic was also ceased. In January 1992, the town had no electricity. Khojaly lived on due to the courage of its people and the heroism of its defenders. But why did they choose Khojaly? By occupying Khojaly, Armenia aimed to gain a strategic advantage and favorable conditions for capturing other cities of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. They also aimed at wiping Khojaly off the face of the earth, since traces of history in Khojaly and surrounding areas represented historical evidence refuting Armenian territorial claims. Over the nights of the 25th and 26th of February 1992, following a massive artillery bombardment, Armenian armed forces and paramilitary units, with support from the former USSR's 366th Motorized Infantry Regiment, moved in to seize the town. Once the assault began, around 2,500 remaining inhabitants tried to leave with the hope of reaching the nearest area under Azerbaijani control. However, they hoped in vain. The fleeing people were ambushed and either killed by gunfire from Armenian military posts or captured near the villages of Nakhchivanli and Pir Jamal. On February 28th, 2 helicopters with a group of journalists managed to reach the location of the massacre. The horrible scene shocked everyone. The field was fully covered by dead bodies. The helicopter's task was to land in the mountains and pick up the bodies at sites of the mass killings. Despite the escort of a second helicopter, it was only able to take 4 dead bodies because of Armenian intense firing. On March 1st, when a group of foreign and local journalists reached the place, the sight that they witnessed was even more terrible. The dead bodies were mutilated and scalped. As a result of this horrible massacre, 613 residents, including 106 women and 63 children of Khojaly, were killed. 487 were disabled. 1,275 civilians were taken hostage and subjected to reprisals, insults, and humiliations. Around 150 people are still missing. The world hopes tragedy like this will never, ever happen in history again.
And right now, I want to invite Head of Department, State Committee on Work with the Diaspora of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Salhat Abbasova, to our stage.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests and friends, aziz hamvatanlarim. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Mr. Farid and Mehriban Mammadov for their invaluable efforts in organizing this international conference. I also want to thank each of you for being here today. Your presence is a tribute to the memory of the innocent victims of Khojaly. At this conference, we will hear from distinguished speakers and engage in meaningful discussion on why it remains essential 33 years on and for a generation to come to honor the memory of the victim of Khojaly genocide and demand justice for this atrocity. The short video that just you watched presented key facts about the tragedy, but there are many other horrific details that are too painful to show to the public. Today I will try to be a bit brief, but it is important to say and emphasize that more than 30 years, the Republic of Azerbaijan and Azerbaijanis over the world have carried the pain of Khojaly in their hearts. We have tirelessly sought to expose the truth about this conflict, history of Karabakh, and the crimes committed against our people. We have continuously called for the enforcement of international law and the implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions against the aggressors. In 2020, Azerbaijan liberated its occupied lands, including Khojaly. Now we will look for the future. A construction is underway, and those forcibly displaced from Karabakh 3 decades ago are returning to their newly built villages and smart cities. The survivors of Khojaly will once again rebuild their lives in their rightful homeland. Azerbaijan remains committed to lasting peace and call for a peace agreement based on fairness and justice. We hope the aggressors and their supporters recognize their responsibility and make decisions that prioritize human life. Unfortunately, true justice has not yet been served. The souls of the victims will only rest in peace when those responsible for these crimes are held accountable. Allowing such impunity will only encourage future crimes and spread the dangerous ideologies. Now let us watch a short video from Khojaly, a message of hope, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of peace. Thank you so much for coming today for this event and joining us for Remember Khojaly victims. Let's see the film.
Cenab Prezident, hoş geldiniz. Sağ olun, hoş geldiniz. Sağ olun. Sağ olun, Khojaly'nin Balıca kendine hoş geldiniz.
Sağ ol.
Allah sizi korusun, çünkü bu günü bize yaşattınız. 30 yıllık hasretimize son verdiniz. Sağ olun dedem. Ben. Geç.
Cenab-ı Prezident hoş geldin.
Hoş gördük.
Cenab-ı Prezident hoş geldin. Sana gelin, bana gelsin. Sağ olun.
Necə yaşayırsınız burada?
Yaxşı.
Yaxşı, salam. Sağ ol.
Geç üstüne başına, geç öyle. Sana kurban olun, senin gerek olun, kurban olun.
Təbrik edirəm sizi.
Sağ olun. Çok sağ olun.
Balıca kəndə yerləşdiniz ki.
Çok sağ olun.
Paylaş kızım. Uzun illərin həsrətinə də son qoydu.
Allah sana değmesin, koydum. Bu elə bir son değil. Bu büyük son.
İndi də bütün bizim işğal altında vaxtilə olmuş hərəkətlərimizi bərpa edirik. Artıq Balıca kəndi 10-cu yaşayış məntəqəsidir ki, işğaldan sonra biz bu kəndi də bərpa etdik. Mənə verilən məlumata görə artıq 460 keçmiş köçkün burada yerləşib, 137 ev bərpa edilib və əlavə haradasa 60-a yaxın evdə bərpa ediləcək. 460 insan artıq bu kənddə yerləşib, şərait də yaxşıdır. Evlər bərpa edilib, yenidən tikilib. Burada rahat yaşamaq üçün bütün şərait imkanlar var və bildiyiniz kimi Balıca kəndini biz 2023-cü ilin sentyabrında azad etdik. Torpaqlarımızın işğaldan azad edilməsi işləri mərhələli yollarla təmin edilmişdir. İkinci Qarabağ müharibəsi və ondan sonra antiterror əməliyyatı ərazi bütövlüyümüzün, suverenliyimizin tam bərpa edilməsinə gətirib çıxardı. Separatçıların kökü kəsildi. Azərbaycan ərazisində separatizmin kökü tam kəsilmişdir və Azərbaycan vətəndaşları öz qurma torpağına qayıda bilir. Şimdi hər yerdə quruculuq işləri aparılır, bərpa işləri aparılır. Dünən mən Ağdam rayonundaydım. Ağdam şəhəri sıfırdan inşa edilir və gözəl şəhər olacaq. Xan kəndini də biz bərpa edəcəyik və vaxtilə burada yararsız vəziyyətə düşmüş binalar indi sökülür. Yeni binalar inşa ediləcək. Bildiyiniz kimi Qarabağ Universiteti artıq fəaliyyət göstərir və bu il yeni korpuslar inşa ediləcək. Artıq orada 1000-dən çox tələbə oxuyur. Buna görə hər cür şərait var. Ali məktəb var, orta məktəblər var, xəstəxanalar, ictimai yerlər, iş yerləri. Bugün mən tikiş fabrikinin fəaliyyəti ilə tanış oldum. Artıq 200-dən çox işçi var orada. Öz əksəriyyəti, demək olar ki, mütləq əksəriyyəti qadınlar. Qadınlar üçün də iş yerləri yaradılıb. Əsas odur ki, indi tikinti, bərpa işləri sürətlə getsin. Bunun üçün də bütün gücümüzü səfərbər eləmişik və o cümlədən Ballıca kəndinin bərpası da artıq son mərhələdədir. Və təbii olaraq Ballıcada olub da Balın tadına baxmamaq da mümkün deyil. Buna görə icazənizlə bu Ballıdır yoxsa?
Thank you for your attention.
And right now, I want to invite Farid Zeynalli, a distinguished member of our community and First Secretary of Embassy of Azerbaijan in Washington, D.C. He represents Azerbaijan's voice on the global stage and works tirelessly and strengthens international relations.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to speak here today about the terrible tragedy of our modern history, Khojaly genocide. And today we gather to honor the memory of innocent victims. While talking about the tragic events, we have always referred to international law and recognized international reports. With that said, I would like to stress that independent reports from Human Rights Watch, international media, eyewitness accounts confirm that these atrocities were not random acts of war, but part of the systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing. The perpetrators of these crimes have never been brought to justice, and Armenia continues to deny its responsibility. Tragically, history repeated itself during the 44-day war in 2020, when Armenian forces once again targeted Azerbaijan civilians in cities like Ganja and Barda, using lethal weapons to inflict maximum harm. Despite these atrocities, Azerbaijan remained and remains committed to peace and regional cooperation. We are not here to dwell in the past out of hatred. We are here because the truth and justice must prevail. As a diplomat, I would rather highlight what was done by Azerbaijani government, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Embassy of Azerbaijan for spreading out this truth. With the efforts of Azerbaijan government and the Azerbaijan diaspora, as well as respected members of our Azerbaijan community, like Azerbaijan Center of Midwest America, international community has begun recognizing the Khojaly massacre as a crime against humanity. 11 US states assemblies have officially passed resolutions commemorating the massacre, while more than 15 other states have issued statements, declarations, and memorials in remembrance of victims. Additionally, several members of the US Congress have acknowledged the Khojaly tragedy through their official statements over the years. This recognition is a crucial step towards justice and historical truth. As we remember Khojaly, we must reaffirm our commitment to justice, truth, and accountability. The international community must not remain silent in the face of such crimes. Recognition of this massacre is not just about the past, it's about ensuring that such tragedies never happen again. May the memory of Khojaly's victim live on, and may justice one day be served. Thank you.
And right now, we're going to listen a great piano performance by Gunay Askarova, which is going to be Kroglu Overture. Thank you. And right now, I want to invite Mr. Malik Ayub Sumbaye, who is a journalist, geographical analyst, broadcaster, and the author of the Tovuz to Karabakh. And I want to, at the same time, I want to invite Ali Askarov, who is the professor in the Department of the Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of North Carolina. He expertise in conflict resolution and the global peace efforts, and truly invaluable. And at the same time, I want to invite Mr. Calvin Dark, who is a distinguished member of our community and international affairs and communication expert at president of RC Communications. He has contributed significantly to diplomacy and global discourse. And I want to invite Stephen Brooks, who is associate professor at the National Defense University. He offers deep insights into international security and strategic affairs. And at the same time, I want to invite Ms. Fabiana Ceyhan, who is editor-in-chief of Installation.com and president of the Board of Journalism of Foreign Affairs. As a TV presenter who was speaking in BRICS and G20 in Brazil about human rights, she is dedicated to raise awareness through international media.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you on this ceremony of this condolence about the Khojaly genocide. So, justice for Khojaly, I think that is an important aspect when we talk about the Azerbaijani culture, its heritage, and the people of Azerbaijan. So I spent some time in Azerbaijan, and I see that when it comes to genocide, and especially towards the Khojaly, so the people of Azerbaijan are quite heartfelt in condolence, and especially in this aggression that they faced by Armenians. So I will start my presentation. So in 1992, the Khojaly massacre that has been committed by the Armenian forces along with the 366 Soviet regiment in the small town of the Khojaly. So the international media and the Azerbaijani authorities, they said that 613 people from Khojaly, they were killed in a very brutal and in a very inhumane way. And this purpose of the killing, like in one night in a small town, if something happened, that is beyond imagination. And it was based completely on the hatred and toward aggression, just for make of the massacre. The human cost and a night of horror, I think that those families who suffered this massive genocide and the horrific execution at mass level. So I think that there is a quote that it was not a massacre, but it was, according to the survivors who were testimony, that it was completely a massacre in which at this number of the people who were killed and just to make the situation more volatile and aggressive. So this is the human cost that the people of the Khojaly, they have paid, and it was the night of horror. So far, I think that the one important aspect that we should know about the Khojaly genocide, that there is an international recognition, and 16 countries, including 24 American states, have acknowledged this as a genocide. Organization of the Islamic countries also adopted 13 documents on Khojaly genocide. So I think there is international recognition, but there should be more international recognition, because to expose such kind of the genocide and the massacres is actually unveil those forces and those faces actually who commit such kind of the crimes. So there should be strong international recognition of the Khojaly genocide. So then we comes to international condemnation. So the European Court of the Human Rights in its judgment in 2010 described that there is a gravity may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. So there is international condemnation, and there are different human rights groups who have condemned this and term it as a massacre. So in 2025, we are sitting here and we are remembering those who lost their beloved one and those who were killed on that night. So why in 2025 this matters? And it matters because we saw there is a lot of other humanitarian crises, there is other massacres. So along with these massacres, we should remember the Khojaly genocide. And the reason behind this is that when you expose and when you discuss about such kind of the crimes, so those faces who actually commit, the perpetrators, they should come and they should face the justice. Because if you will not expose these crimes, I think that could go into the pages of the history. But to remember them is actually to give a little that we can do and contribute for those who lost their lives. So I saw that in Baku there is a monument of the Khojaly and a mother carrying a child. And actually this is that she's asking for the justice for the international organizations and the local and the regional organizations, because she is telling the Noha, the word that I am using actually, is actually that one that is something like the condemning and the appeal to the international community that the Khojaly genocide should be remembered. And she is actually her appeal to the mother cry. This is a monument that is named with the mother cry in Baku. I think Azerbaijani and other people, they know about this monument that is that the symbol of sorrow. And I think that let us honor the victims. Thank you very much for your patience to listen my this brief presentation. Thank you very much.
I want to say thank you to Mr. Malik Ayub Sumbal for his presentation, and I want to give the word to Stephen Brooks.
I'd just like to begin by stating that the views and thoughts that I'm going to express now are mine and do not represent that of the National Defense University or the United States Department of Defense. What I'd like to briefly address is how do we try and understand or make sense of the war crimes of mass murder of hundreds of citizens, civilians, as part of a campaign of ethnic cleansing by Armenian and Russian troops. The deliberate targeting of civilians who are by their very nature unarmed is a violation of the laws of war, namely the Geneva Conventions, to say nothing of forcibly threatening or expelling people, citizens, civilians from their homes. Among the courses I teach is ethics, particularly with an emphasis on military ethics and the laws of war, since I teach for the United States Department of Defense. And as we commemorate this tragedy today, I'd like to offer some thoughts from philosophers who have wrestled with one of the oldest questions in history. How do we determine what is right and wrong, what is moral and immoral, what is just and unjust? The ancient Greek philosophers, namely Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics, proposed a theory of ethics known as virtue ethics, whereby their investigation into what is right and wrong, just and unjust, was focused on virtue, a form of excellence. Virtue ethics asks, what would a virtuous person do? And focuses on the character of the person, not the consequences or the effects of the act. Clearly, murdering innocents who are unarmed and thus non-combatants is not an act of virtue and not something a virtuous person would do. Unfortunately, the problem with virtue ethics, as this massacre demonstrates, is there are people who are not virtuous and sometimes engage in utterly depraved and evil actions. In my opinion, only someone inclined towards virtue would be guided or influenced by virtue ethics. So unfortunately, virtue ethics clearly does not apply to people who do not have virtue. Another theory of ethics is called deontological or duty ethics, most associated with the 19th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. According to Kant, the morality of an action or behavior is based on what is one's duty and the motives behind performing that duty. Kant summed up his theory of deontological or duty ethics with something called the categorical imperative. An action is right or wrong, according to Immanuel Kant, if in every situation that action or behavior is moral. Killing civilians clearly cannot be a duty of a soldier, because there is no situation, no circumstance where that is moral or acceptable. To do so is not just an example of evil, but actually tyranny, which can be defined among many ways as the advantage of the strong over the weak, or might makes right. The final theory of ethics that I'd like to briefly mention is called consequentialism, most associated with the philosophers John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, two 19th century English philosophers. Instead of focusing on virtue or one's duty, they focused on, well, the consequences of an action or a behavior. They asked, does the consequence or action lead to a positive, favorable outcome? Clearly, the consequences of killing civilians who are unarmed is not a favorable or positive outcome, and instead is an evil outcome. So as we commemorate the Khojaly massacre, I'd like to conclude by trying, if I may, to answer the question of why do massacres and war crimes occur? In my opinion, they occur because international relations and international politics is characterized by the existence of sovereign states who are motivated by self-interest. And sadly, morality often does not factor in to a state's pursuit of self-interest. Rather, it seems that power, opportunity, and expediency are what drives the actions of most states in most circumstances. And instead of morality being a source or a guide of action for states, it perversely is used to justify actions by states that often include depraved and evil actions such as the massacre that we are commemorating today. So in conclusion, what does this say about the Geneva Conventions, which forbids the murder of civilians and also the expulsion of people from their homes and homeland? Clearly, the Geneva Conventions failed the victims, as did international law and the international community. Not only was there no justice for these victims, but there remains to not be justice for these victims. The 19th century British philosopher Edmund Burke famously said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." This highlights the importance of speaking out and raising awareness of war crimes and genocide, no matter how long the acts occurred. Because as Dr. Martin Luther King said, justice delayed is justice denied. Thank you very much.
I want to say thank you to Stephen Brooks for his valuable speech, and I want to give microphone to Mrs. Fabiana Jehan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for all of you being here this afternoon. I came all the way down from South America. It was a long time flight, but I came here to speak to you because I think I have one very strong commitment with Azerbaijan, because I was the first Brazilian journalist to set foot in Karabakh, and one of the first journalists in the world. In that first group, there were only 3 journalists from Italy, I think, France, and I was a part of this first group of international journalists to visit Karabakh when there was not even an airport in Shusha. It was a very tough decision when I left home, left my kids, my husband, to go there. My husband kept saying to me, "Oh, be careful, there must be mining over there," which we know that Armenians left a lot of mining there. This is not in my speech, but I want to add you these very important things. When we saw without ourselves, I saw it with myself, all that land in Karabakh region with a lot of mining, I realized that they didn't do any construction. There was nothing in that land. The Armenians, they put those mining there just to make sure that Azerbaijanis could not do anything. And then the Azerbaijanis were doing the opposite way. They were doing constructions, they were building the airport in Shusha. They were doing a lot of things which I saw myself could bring a job for the people, could make the country grow more. I'm sorry for my English, I'm not a native speaker, but I hope you all understand my message. So the reason I'm here is this commitment I have with Azerbaijan for one thing I saw myself back in 2020. I remember we traveled for almost 10 hours from Baku on a bus and witnessing all the ruins and traces of war which can be seen in each liberated territory of Karabakh. But it was not about the physical conditions, such as destruction of infrastructure or buildings, but also psychological situations of the people who were deprived from their homes for 30 years and waiting for the time they will return. And that was the time of return. I was there before many of them. The reason why I stand here today is because I believe in humanity. I believe in peace. I'm a citizen of the world. I have also Italian citizenship. I'm also a Turkish citizen and a Brazilian citizen. As I said, I was born in Brazil. Being an international journalist allows me to explore, learn more about, and analyze the stories of the people suffering from war, conflicts, or territorial disputes. I think it's important to always remember and commemorate this day so that tragedies like this will not happen again in any country and will not be forgotten by the public. I believe that the world needs to know and accept the truth that this tragedy was the gravest crime committed against peaceful Azerbaijani people in the course of Armenian aggressive war against Azerbaijan. What makes Khojaly's genocide the most terrible and tragic pages of Azerbaijan history is because of the characteristics. First, Khojaly was totally civilian settlement and there was no military equipment, and that's why attacking civilians in Khojaly was not fair. As my friend said here, there was no need for a military intervention there. So it's a crime, it's a war crime. If somebody say it's not, if there are countries that don't recognize this, I'm sorry for them, they are wrong. They are wrong against human rights. Armenia aimed to gain psychological precedence for the next offensive operations and bring fear for Azerbaijanis. As a result of the attack and capture of the city, 613 people slaughtered, 8 families were killed completely, and among the murdered people, 56 of them is slaughtered with special cruelty. To ignore the facts is not honest, is not human, and sets a precedent for unnecessary wars and conflicts. Therefore, remembering and calling for justice and respect is the role of all of us, especially media people and agencies who believe in peace and a better world. I would like to conclude my speech with my wish that more countries will recognize Khojaly genocide. I don't know how many of you are Azerbaijanis. I believe that many of you are. So I would like to tell you that you have a friend on me in Brazil and in South America, and it's genuine. I came here today also, I have a lot of work to do, I'm a TV presenter, but when they called me, invited me, I said, I have to go. I know that Chicago was very cold, I'm not very good with the cold weather, but I said, I have to go because I have to help my friends to speak out, okay? So thank you so much and count on me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fabiana Ceyhan, for your great speech. And right now, I want to introduce you a really special person to you. So, Agil Husseinov is the CEO of Adventure Group and one of our distinguished member of our community. And he's not only an entrepreneur, at the same time, he's a talented tar player. And I want to invite him to our stage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Uncle Zeynalli, for your breathtaking performance on a tar. And right now, I want to give microphone to Calvin Dark.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here in Chicago, and I want to thank the ACMA for this invitation to speak with you today. And I think that the best way that I can participate in this, not only honoring session, but thinking to the future, I want to talk about briefly my experience visiting the Karabakh last year, what I learned about the past, what I experienced in the present when I was there, and then what that means for the future. So just to let you know who I am, I divide my time between Washington, D.C. and Rabat, Morocco. If my face looks familiar, I do a lot of international affairs commentary analysis on TV. You can't mistake this North Carolina accent, so you may recognize that when you hear it. I'm also president of RC Communications. We specialize in advocacy and crisis communications and media training, based in Washington and Morocco, but we go everywhere. I'm also part of the U.S. State Department's Speakers Program. It's a group of communications experts and trainers that work with journalists and civil society on issues like campaigns, election, and fighting disinformation. The goal of this conference, fostering global dialogue between peoples and countries and communities, is important to me because it's always been my passion. It started in Morocco, where I did Fulbright research there, and I talked about building relations between the U.S. and the Muslim Arab world. I also continue this work with the Duke University Library Advisory Board, where we talk about history, difficult history in the United States of slavery and racism and the struggle for civil rights in America, and how Duke libraries can help provide tools so affected communities can learn and face that history. So it's from that viewpoint that I want to share briefly a little bit about my visit to the Karabakh. Key takeaways that I had, I picked 4 activities that I did. And I just want to share what my opportunities were and my observations were, and I hope at some point we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions, because in my line of work, I'm usually answering people's questions and giving my opinion and talking way too much, and so I want to continue that today. So just to let you know a little bit about my trip, in July of 2023, I had the opportunity to travel to Azerbaijan and conduct a research visit to the Karabakh with a group of journalists, international affairs analysts. It was organized by Azerbaijan State Committee on Work with Diaspora. The timing of the visit was very important for me to learn the history about a conflict that I wanted to be more familiar about. I didn't know that much about it before. And as an analyst who covers current events, the visit was, the timing was important because my visit took place just a few weeks before the military operation in September of 2023. I even had the opportunity to analyze what was happening while I was there in Azerbaijan on TV in Azerbaijan. And there aren't many people that look like me in Azerbaijan, so after one night on TV, I had a lot of people that recognized me in Baku, and they had a lot of questions about my perspective as an American on what was happening, and I really appreciated those cultural exchanges. I also, after I left Azerbaijan, I went to do a project in Egypt, and I was able to talk about my experience, about what I had seen visiting the Karabakh on Al Jazeera as they covered the military operation. And so, just to tell you the activities that I picked that kind of marked my time, we did a visit to the, and excuse my pronunciation, Agdam, the Hiroshima of the Caucasus, as they called it. We had a detailed briefing and a demining demonstration from the Mine Action Agency of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Now, my takeaway from that was, first of all, as an international affairs analyst, we hear about a lot of things, we see a lot of things, but you don't really understand how dangerous and powerful mines are until you see a demining demonstration. The issue of demining really illustrated to me the extent of the violence that took place during the conflict, and it is a reminder of the enormous future challenge that faces the region, because completely demining the area would take decades and billions of dollars. And so that was something that really affected me and had a great impact on me. I would show you the video of the demining, but the force was so strong, we were half a mile away, it knocked my phone out of my hand with the video. And so it really brought home exactly how dangerous this was during the conflict and how dangerous it is now, because there are hundreds of thousands of mines that haven't been removed from the territory. The second part of my visit I want to highlight was the visit to Ganja City and the tour of the memorial, the damage following the Armenian missile attack on one of the central settlements that was located far away from the front line during the Second Karabakh War in October 2020. My main takeaway from that was visiting and seeing the destruction on display. I saw the civilian cost of the conflict, because these victims weren't soldiers, they were families far from the front lines. I was able to speak with families of survivors, and it's clear that psychological damage was significant and will take time to heal long after the physical destruction is cleared away. And so it really helped put into perspective the violence and the cost that people are still paying today for the conflict that happened, particularly in Ganja City. Now, for the last two activities, I want to focus on something a little bit more hopeful. I had a visit to the Khojaly region. We toured villages and settlements destroyed by Armenian forces, the more Mehriban village mosque. And we've also visited a city that was rebuilt, Khojaly, if I'm pronouncing it right. It's a smart village that is being rebuilt. My takeaway from that was, while the stories about the attacks and destructions were tragic, it was a very hopeful sign to see the resilience of the people in the region who were determined to rebuild their cities and their lives. I found the smart villages fascinating because I think they can serve as a model for incorporating green technology, internet access in rural areas in Azerbaijan or in any other place around the world facing similar challenges following a conflict. So that gave me a lot of hope. And other positive thing that I saw that really affected me was we visited the Guba region, the tour of the Six Dome Synagogue of the Red Settlement, the Museum of the World Mountain Jews, the Genocide Memorial Complex, and we had a discussion on Muslim-Jewish relations in conflict zones. I was particularly fascinated by this part of the visit because interfaith dialogue is a passion of mine from the beginning of my life. And I was really just impressed to see the important role that interfaith cooperation and dialogue between Muslim and Jewish communities played, the role that it played during the conflict, and how interfaith dialogue continues. I will never forget one of the quotes that one of our tour guides said to me that I thought was really amazing, was he said that the dialogue and tolerance that I had heard about wasn't a goal or a project, it was just what they do. And so I think that that can serve as an example as well. Of course, when I got back, as I said, I returned just before the military operation in September 2023. So I had an opportunity to talk a lot about this to an American audience, many of whom had not heard about the conflict. And since my research visit, I've gotten to learn a lot more. And I think that it's conferences like this where we not only remember what happened, but we think about how that can affect the future. I think it's a very valuable conversation to have. And so I will close there, and I hope that if anyone has any questions during this or afterwards, that you will speak to me, and I look forward to meeting and talking with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience about Karabakh visit. And right now, I want to give microphone to Ali Askarov and her daughter, Fatima Askar.
First of all, I'd like to start with appreciation. I want to say thank you to Azerbaijan Diaspora Committee and ACMA for making this event possible. Thank you. I got a tremendous help from my daughter, Fatima Asker, to make this presentation. So I want to invite her here as well to do this together with me. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this event. It's great to see so many people want to spread awareness about it. So let's get started.
Yeah, she made a presentation at her school on this same topic a few days ago in North Carolina, and I think she was pretty successful. So you can you can start with it.
All right. So as you know, if you're on social media, you can see that so many people are trying to conceal this horrible atrocity that was committed in 1992. But just so you know, the truth will prevail because it's hard to hide the truth because sooner or later it resurfaces. So today my father and I will talk about the historical truth. Okay, so on February of 25th to the 26th overnight in 1992, a massacre was perpetrated by Armenian forces in which 613 innocent civilians were murdered, including 63 children, 106 women, and 70 elderly. 8 families were completely annihilated. 25 children were left orphaned after losing both parents, and 130 children lost at least one parent. And then 487 individuals were left wounded. 1,275 people were taken captive, and the fate of 150 of the captives, including 63 women and 26 children, is still unknown to this day.
See, sometimes it's really hard to speak after distinguished speakers, but sometimes it's easy because they cover a lot. In fact, they did cover a lot. So as Stefan mentioned, if the consequences of war or any type of conflict are bad, so this is a morality issue, but this conflict has in fact passed as well, or this massacre, we call it a massacre, but in fact it was also a genocide. So it's both massacre and genocide. And it had a long past, in fact. I'm gonna go to past dates as well, but I'm gonna speak about the afterwards as well. So it's not something like freestanding conflict case, but it is with history and with ramifications. So this is about genocide.
Okay, so what is the dictionary definition of a genocide? It's the deliberate killing, the mass killing of an ethnic, racial, or religious group, in this case was the Azerbaijani civilians, perpetrated with the intent to destroy or obliterate the entire nation, to claim and captivate the lands. So the Khojaly massacre fulfills all the criteria of the concept of a genocide because they went on to ethnically cleanse and displace over 700,000 Azerbaijani civilians from Karabakh, and they were killed based on their identities, including their nationality, ethnicity, and religion, with the support of Russians and, of course, Armenians.
Yeah, now I have a question. Please name 2 nations that have used the word of genocide more than any other nation on earth. Definitely one of them is Armenians, right? So who did this genocide then? Those same Armenians, okay? So what they do, they speak about genocide against them while they committing genocide against others. So that, in fact, is an ethics issue, right? See, this guy, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, was the first president of the Second Armenian Republic. Probably most of you remember him, right? He came to power when Armenia became independent in 1991. And he is one of the major Armenian politicians that really were instrumental to occupy Azerbaijani lands. Okay, recently, Albert Isakov, do you know of him? Albert Isakov is a guy who lives in Canada. He was born and raised in Baku, Azerbaijan. His mother is Armenian and his father is Jewish. So he's fluent in Armenian, okay? So he's a truthful person. He just put a YouTube video that I'm not gonna play it. It's in Armenian, in fact. Levon Terpetrosyan speaks in Armenian, and then Albert Isakov translates it to some extent, okay? So it's Armenian-Russian. But you can, of course, later on, I can share this with you. You can watch it yourself if you speak or understand Russian. So this guy, Isakov, placed this video on YouTube. That's an historical video, okay, historical. So Levon Petrosyan speaks to Armenian insurgency in 1993, okay, on July 23, when Agdam, that he mentioned, thank you, Kelvin, Agdam was occupied or invaded by Armenian forces, okay? He speaks to Armenian paramilitary insurgency, okay, in that video. Why this is so important? Because it is historical and it speaks about historical facts. So, Levon Petrosyan mentioned a few key points here, okay? Very interesting points, very, very interesting to explain this conflict, okay? Armenia and Azerbaijan, like other republics, Soviet republics, gained their independence in 1991, okay, 1991. But the War of Karabakh started in 1988, okay, 3 years prior to Soviet disintegration. And Levon Petrosyan confesses that they were ready for that. And in fact, he says that it was us who accelerated Soviet disintegration. How? Creating problems in Azerbaijan. And he says that we were ready for this conflict. He says that we were ready militarily. We had our insurgents ready. So it means that they had weapons. They had secret army to attack Azerbaijan.
So there was a word white genocide. Is there any special?
Because according to the definition of genocide, we can go to that if you don't mind. Go to that definition. Go to that definition. Go to genocide definition, 1948. You see, it says that if you destroy a group of people in whole or in part, based on their national, ethnic, racial, or religious identity. So this is genocide. So in Khojaly, these people were destroyed in whole or in part based on their national, ethnic, and religious identities. See, one of them is enough, but there are 3 of them over 4. Out of 4, national, ethnic, racial, and religious, 3 of them were fulfilled in Khojaly. That's why you can really call this a genocide. It's pretty straightforward.
But I saw the word white genocide in the next page.
White or why?
White.
Probably it's a typo, probably. It should be wide genocide, okay? Not white. See what else Petrosyan says over there. He says that in Baku, there were 500,000 Armenians, not only in Baku, but in Baku and other cities and towns of Azerbaijan. 500,000 Armenians. Now, Azerbaijan has been accused for forcing those people out of Azerbaijan. But now he confesses that it was us that created the situation so that they left Azerbaijan. But why? You understand it, right? He says it was us, Armenians, that made Armenians living in Azerbaijan to leave Azerbaijan. Okay, not Azerbaijanis, but us, Armenians. But there were at least two critical reasons. The first reason was the fact that Azerbaijan could manipulate them after we started the Karabakh War. Okay, we wanted to eliminate that kind of problem so that they did not have any Armenians like hostages in Azerbaijan. The main reason, however, is the fact that we needed Armenians in Armenia, and 300,000 people, Armenians out of 500,000, came to Armenia, and after many years, after several years, they're going to multiply and become millions. So we have resolved our demography problems. Okay, why do you then accuse Azerbaijan for forcing them out of Azerbaijan? You see, this is a confession, historical confession, and people like Azimov, that guy, and they now today they question it. They say, hey, you were the main reason that you forced us to leave Azerbaijan. Okay, and see, furthermore, he says, okay, this white genocide, you mean this? This is not related to Khojaly. Okay, thank you. I'm going to explain this now. This is not all. What happened to Azerbaijanis living in Armenia? How many of you knew that there were hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis living in Armenia? Azerbaijanis were living in Armenia before Armenians came to today's Armenia, to this geography. Remember the documentary, right? Just was shown before we started to speak. That documentary mentioned that two types of agreements, historical agreements. One is Gülistan, the second one is Turkmenchai. Turkmenchai was concluded in 1828 between Iran and between Russian Empire. But that Iran was at that time ruled by Azerbaijanis. That was Khazar dynasty, okay, not Persia, okay? Don't mix up. That also was Azerbaijan, in fact. But it's probably at that time they were not calling the country, as you know, by geography or something like that, but by dynasties. What kind of dynasty was ruling the state, okay? So what happened at 1828? Armenians started to flow to the region. And we can speak about this, of course, in more detail, but it's gonna take hours and hours. I have some publications on that. And Armenians started to flow to the region primarily where today's Armenia is, but still they were a minority, not a majority. They needed land. They had also secret agenda at that time. And Russia, the Russian Empire, okay, St. Petersburg, believed in Armenians more than in Muslim Azerbaijanis. They were not called Azerbaijanis at that time. They were called either Turks or Tatars, okay, or simply Muslims. Why? Because they did not have borders as we understand today. At that time, there was no demarcation, as you know, no physical fences, something like that, to prevent movement from this part of the border to another or vice versa. And they wanted to settle Armenians alongside the borderline, and that was the case why Armenians came to where Armenia is today, okay? But still Azerbaijanis, or as we called them at that time, Turks or Muslims or Tatars were a majority, but Armenians had secret agenda to have their own state. What they needed to ethnically cleanse those lands. And the final stage was that 1988, when Armenians ousted all Azerbaijanis from Armenia. That's 300,000 people at least. Some sources mention it 350 to 500,000 people. That's a white genocide. Why? They were forced to leave their houses, their lands, whatever they had in Armenia, and come to either Azerbaijan or other parts of the Soviet Union at that time, mostly Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Russia, but most of them, I would say 90%, came to Azerbaijan, okay? This was another fact of genocide. Why this happened? Petrosyan explains this as well, says that, hey, they would be a great problem for us if they remained in Armenia, because potentially they could also demand autonomy from us. They could demand what we demanded from Azerbaijan. They could say that we have political rights. They could say that we have other types of rights. We also have rights to be elected, elect, rule the country, etc. Okay, we're gonna come to this point later on, one more time. So that was about Levon Ter-Petrosyan, okay? I said we had passed to the Khojaly genocide, okay? Now we are going really to history. This Khachaznuni was the first prime minister of the first Armenian Republic because they managed to establish or to declare their republic in 1918, 1918, okay? And the territory of that republic was much smaller than the territory of this republic now they have. Much smaller because at least the region between Nakhchivan region of Azerbaijan and mainland of Azerbaijan, or Azerbaijan proper, which is called Zengezur, that was part of Azerbaijan still in 1918, 1919, 1920. Armenian Republic, or First Republic of Armenia, established in 1918, survived a little bit longer than 2 years, okay? It was declared, like in Azerbaijan, on 28th of May, 1918, and it ended in 1920, last day of November. So 2 years and a half, okay? And this guy was prime minister of that Armenia, the first prime minister between 1918 and 1919. So the Soviets came to Armenia in, again, November of 1920. And the guy, of course, fled Armenia, and others fled Armenia. Khachaznuni, the prime minister of Armenia, first prime minister, also fled Armenia. They gathered in Bucharest, Romania, okay, in 1923, and he had a historical speech there. Today, most Armenian historians reject this. They say that this speech has been modified by others who dislike Armenians, but in fact, there are a number of versions of this speech, and most part of them overlap. So I'm pretty sure that we have the original one. Okay, Khachaznuni started to criticize Armenians, what they did in 1918 and 1919. See, first of all, he says that we independent Armenia could not survive because we used our resources not wisely. What did we do? We started to fight with everyone, with Azerbaijanis, with Turks, with Georgians, etc. This is what he says. That's why we were not able to survive, and the Bolsheviks, it was easy for them to occupy us. In fact, he says it's good that they came and took over Armenia. What he says that we governed our country for 2.5 years, and we had continual internal fights. Now what he says, Agapapa. Where is Agapapa? This is Agbaba, Akbaba. This is Amasya region of Armenia, today's Armenia. Who lived there until 1988-89? Azerbaijanis. 98% of Azerbaijanis. He mentioned Zot. Zot is Zot, and really, like until recently, it was a famous village, pretty famous and huge, important. Who lived there? Azerbaijanis, 100%. He mentioned Zanki Basar. It's not Zanki Bazar, it is Zanki or Zanki Basar. Basar, not Bazar, but of course, an Armenian could misspell it or mispronounce it. Who lived there? Azerbaijanis. And he mentioned Vedi Bazar or Vedi Basar, who lived there until recently. 90% of them Azerbaijanis. And he mentions the value of Milli. See, he mentioned Sharur. It is still part of Azerbaijan, but some part of Sharur is in Armenia because it's part of Zengezur at the same time. He mentioned Nakhchivan, he mentioned Zengezur. That is the main problem today between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You see, all of them are ours, our lands, you see? See what he said? He says that, Kasasnuni says that we destroyed bread-producing lands like Sharur and Veti, Azerbaijani lands. They needed bread, right? There was starvation. And they said, Bolsheviks came and saved our lives. Otherwise, we could starve to that. And also, we destroyed the cattle lands like Agbaba. Okay. Now, see when it started, right? The problem started long before 1992. Now, the third one, and I'm gonna be done with history. Now, this is the Prime Minister of Armenia today, okay? Nikol Pashinyan. I have some respect for Nikol Pashinyan because he wants to change something in Armenia. He's a revolutionary, okay? He wants to bring some change to the psychology of Armenians, to the way they rule their states, etc. See what he said just recently, only on 24th of January of this year. He said that in 1939, there was no agenda for Armenian genocide, okay? But in 1950, he says, we started to speak about Armenian genocide in Turkey. Why? He asks this question, it's not me, the Prime Minister of Armenia. So there was a political agenda, right? Something really they had to use for political purposes against Turkey at that time, but later against Azerbaijan as well. Okay, it's enough, right? So he questions this. He says that, hey, there's something to question. Recently he said that it's not a good idea for Armenians really to get embedded in the claims of Armenian genocide because the world is about developing, okay, day by day, and we just got stuck psychologically in those days, and he is right. Okay, now this is, you see a brief historical past, and they started the war in 1988, by 1993, by the end of 1993, they occupied not only Karabakh, but also 7 adjacent Azerbaijani administrative regions, okay? And the question is this just an occupation? When you occupy a land, no, you kill people. You kill people, you force them to flee, and you create misery for them. Okay, maybe these are somehow acceptable because of war. How can you really justify killing civilians? Killing children, elderly, women? See, this is Agdam. See, Agdam that they caused to Azerbaijan. This is just one example, because when this guy, first president of Armenia, was speaking to the insurgents, he announced the occupation of Agdam by Armenians, and they stood up, all of them, and started to applaud. This is Agdam, what they did.
Until 1950, reason why Armenians don't prefer the genocide term. Is this related with Jewish genocide? So the United Nations determines
absolutely
genocide term?
You see, this genocide was defined in 1948. It's only 2 years after that. Absolutely correct. Later on, they started to organize against diaspora, Iran diaspora, in 1965. 1965 in Yerevan, historically speaking, or in modern terms, Yerevan, Armenians had incredibly huge rally, 1965, on 24th of April, okay? And that date, by then, in fact, in the Soviet Union, nobody could organize a rally of that kind. It was impossible. What they could do, on 1st of May, for example, the workers could go to streets, okay, because it's in line with Soviet ideology. But in 1965, Armenians organized a meeting against Turkey and started to demand lands from Turkey, okay? It was Khrushchev times. But before that, Joseph Stalin, 1950, Joseph Stalin also claimed lands from Turkey. Ardahan region, Kars region, even some part of Erzurum, some part of Igdir. Joseph Stalin demanded from Turkey. That was one of the main reasons why Turkey became part of NATO, okay? And to become part of NATO, Turkey had to send troops to South Korea. And, Turkey played crucial role over there. Otherwise, South Korea wouldn't be independent today. And they acknowledged this, okay? It was Turks. Because all the NATO states, they withdrew at some point, and Turks rejected. Okay, we're not going to speak about this, but they are grateful to Turks, okay? And Turkey was adopted to NATO after that, okay? So Turkey paid price for that, 1950-51 again. It was related to that as well. Thank you so much. A waste of time. Okay, they started all this incredible tragedy in 1988, and this ended in 1920, right? 2020, I apologize. 2020, how many years? Like 12 years there, like 20 years here. Over 30 years, Armenia spent incredible amount of time, resources. Its soldiers got killed. Its population lived in misery, but it also created problems for Azerbaijan, okay? Massacred our people, killed our people, ruined our economy, etc. So waste of time, right? But who was the main reason for this waste of time? Armenia. And today they should understand this, okay? What did they gain? Nothing. They got another trauma recently, right? But rightfully, we gave them trauma because we had to free our occupied lands. So they lost over 30 years, and I can't really calculate the amount of resources that they lost or they caused us to lose, but also the entire region lost resources because we could not really work jointly. For example, we had our pipeline go like through Georgia instead of going beeline through Armenia. Armenia lost, Azerbaijan lost. Okay, both Armenia and Azerbaijan lost, but they caused that. Okay, so what is a move forward? Let's see. What about today? Okay, this is afterward. Okay, should we wait until they change the new status quo? They want that, right? Some circles in Armenia, they expect that to change the status quo that we have today again. Or there are circles in Armenia, like Armenian Church or Armenian Diaspora, for example, two institutions, they ask to start to renew the war against Azerbaijan and try to regain back what they have lost. They did not lose anything that belongs to them. They lost what they got from others, okay? They should really accept this, but they don't. Okay, but is this good for the region or for Armenia? Of course not. So Pashinyan, why do I have some respect for him? Wants really to change all this. He wants really to conclude a peace treaty with Azerbaijan, despite the pressure from diaspora, from its opposition, from some portion of its army, and from the church, Armenian church. Okay, for different actors. But why really reconciliating with Azerbaijan would be good? Okay, Armenia is squeezed between Azerbaijan and Turkey, primarily. But on the other hand, Armenia, for example, wants to be a hub of transportation. How can you be a hub of transportation if you don't resolve your problems with Azerbaijan and with Turkey? So Pashinyan understands this as far as I can see and tries to resolve all problems with Azerbaijan, but it's not easy for Armenia. Okay, I'll stop here because of time pressure. Farid said that we don't have much time, but if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.
Thank you much for your speech. And today we have really honorable guest, Mr. Tahir Bora Atatanir, who is the Consul General of the Republic of Turkey in Chicago. I want to invite you to the stage, sir.
We just want to welcome you here. Thanks for attending this event. It is an honor for us to have you here as a brother, Turkish brothers. Always stand with us. Thank you.
It's our pleasure to just, be with you, and I cannot just, think about just, not coming to here when you just, give us a call, just, invite us for such kind of event, which is also an atrocity and massacre that we are just, feeling from our heart, and we are always just, together, and when we are united, we are thinking that we will be in a better position to just, let the people understand what had happened, the realities that the world should be just, understanding. So thanks for your efforts. Thanks for the lectures anyway. I'm sure that it will be a nice step forward to just, realize what had happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Teşekkür ederiz. Çok sağ olun.
Bir daha teşekkür ederiz. Thank you for coming.
Right now, we're going to do piano performance by Günay Asgarova. Thank you very much for your great performance. And right now, when I invite Nabat Aminova, who is the founder, resident Azerbaijan American Youth Association, and the Secretary General of the Alliance of Azerbaijani American Organizations. Please.
Good afternoon, dear friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nabat Aminova, and I am greeting you on behalf of the Alliance of Azerbaijani American Associations. Tonight, as we gather in remembrance, Azerbaijanis across America and around the world stand united in honoring the memory of the innocent victims of the Khojaly massacre. We come together not only to mourn their loss, but to reaffirm our commitment to justice, truth, and peace. The tragedy of Khojaly is not just a chapter of Azerbaijan's history, it is a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred, war, and indifference. As we reflect on the past, we must also recognize our responsibility in the present. In an era where conflicts still ignite, where cities and families are torn apart, and where innocent lives continue to be lost, our voices must rise in unity to condemn atrocities, war, and the destruction of human lives. Let this commemoration serve as a call to action, a call to educate, to raise awareness, and to stand against crimes against humanity wherever they occur. We must reject separatism and war and instead champion dialogue, understanding, and coexistence. The lessons of Khojaly should inspire us to work toward a world where no family suffers such a fate again. On behalf of the Alliance of Azerbaijani American Organizations, I extend my deepest gratitude to each of you standing with us, for remembering and for believing in a future shaped by peace and justice. May the memory of those we lost never fade, and may their spirit guide us toward a more just and compassionate world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech. So I want to mention a really important fact about Khojaly massacre. So here, people who survived from this genocide had really bad traumatized about this event. And after years, We had some couple interviews with those people who shared their experiences about Khojaly, what they experienced, and how this massacre shaped their future life. And we want to just some videos, couple videos about those.
There was gunfire, shooting. When they took several people captive, I jumped down off a cliff. I didn't get captured. I got separated from my mother there. I don't know exactly when, but I found my mother after a few days. I wanted to go towards her, but I saw the Armenians had captured her and were taking her away. After that, I was alone. I saw a light and walked towards it. When I got closer, I saw a fire burning. By then, I had already passed right by Armenian military posts. As I got closer to the fire, I saw 5 or 6 people running towards me, shouting. They picked me up. That's when I understood that it was Khojaly village in Agdam, but my right leg from high up and my toes were gone. Maybe it was the frostbite, maybe a bullet, I'm not sure. I had gunshot wounds in several parts of my body, in my leg, in my arm. They took me to Agdam, but when I got there I couldn't see the hospital. A rocket had hit the hospital and destroyed it. I was taken to a train wagon. When I got off the wagon, I was told that I had been there 18 days.
It was night time, just before dawn. My daughter, Sevinja Gayarova, was freezing. Imagine, my children were begging me for bread, for water, but there was nothing. Before my eyes, my little ones froze to death. It was morning, but we didn't even have a single match to light a fire, to warm their hands and feet. I had to leave her there, at the foot of a tree. Still, we wanted to keep moving forward. Then my second child, just 5 years old, right before my eyes, he froze to death too. A child who couldn't even say mother or father fell victim to Armenian cruelty. My sister's children froze to death in front of her. My sister froze too. Only one of her daughters survived. 2 helpless women left alone in the forest. My sister's daughter, just 15 or 16 years old, and me. For 5 days and 5 nights we wandered through the dark forests, in the snow. No fire, no warmth. We kept waiting, hoping someone would come to help us. But there was no one. Nothing. Imagine cutting grass with a sickle. Only a few stalks remained standing. That's how people were being slaughtered. We were crawling. As the shooting continued, I kept crawling. I was dragging my daughter along. Her legs wouldn't move. I had to drag her. She had measles. I lay here like this, thinking that if a bullet hit her side, maybe she wouldn't die, as long as it didn't strike a vital organ. Then suddenly she cried out, "Oh, I've been hit!" You know that statue, the mother's cry? The one where she holds her child in agony? That was my cry. I held her like that. I tried to carry her, but my wounded arm wouldn't let me. I wanted to take her with me, but I couldn't. I screamed, but all I could do was cry out with my hands raised to the sky. The snow kept falling over her. I stood there until the snow had completely covered her.
O kadar üstüm kar örttü ki, kar örtene kadar ben de kaldım orada.
And right now, I want to invite Salhat Abbasova to our stage.
Thank you all. Thank you for our distinguished speakers. Thank you for organizers, the Mehriban Hanım, Farid Mellim, Azerbaijani community, Friends of Azerbaijan, Consul General, representative of Azerbaijan Embassy, musicians, everyone who are there today. We remember Khojaly. We believe in justice. We hope it will come. We can do all together. We can solve everything together. We believe in it. So I would like to be honest today to use the opportunity also to present a book of Mr. Sumbal. It was written just during the Karabakh War. Yes? This book's towards to Karabakh Yeah, very important facts, analysis in these books. So I think it will be good present for our speakers. So I hope one of them also will go to the university, the college of where we actually host this event. And we have also other presents, so we go to our culture again, because we believe that culture, communication, it is the best things which can help all communities to understand each other. So please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. We're waiting for all of you to Azerbaijan again. So, would you like to have a dance for you? No, for this book, for your presentation, for being with us. Thank you. And then, çok teşekkür ederim. So, as we're told, we have today very talented musicians who actually increase all this impression. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your music. And Agil, of course, thank you for your performance. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think thank you very much. So thank you again, Mehriban Hanım, Farid Melim. We hope this international conference will continue as annual and international conference, and we are waiting already for you for the next this event. Thank you all.
I would like to summarize our conference, and we will say next year we're expecting this conference with a different state, and we will announce soon which state will be host this conference. And thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for sharing the event with us. Thank you for your attending. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. As Salhat Hanım mentioned, I hope and wish that we continue this annual conference and expand it more, and then expect more people to attend this. So we honor the victims of Khojaly and reaffirm the commitment to justice and peace. Thank you.